Oké.
Dan moet het goed.
Ja, maar hij kan geen microfoon ontdekken bij mij, want ik heb niet zo'n...
Nee, nee.
Nava,
Yes.
kan je jezelf even unmuten?
Ja, oké.
Hij aan Loes en aan Lies.
Ja, hi.
Oké. Ik ben niet te zien, maar ik
Ja.
ben geloof ik niet mute. Gedalia,
Yes, voice.
I don't know. I'm blacked out. I don't know why completely.
Hold on. I can. Oh no.
No, you
It shows me
cannot.
that you have video on.
I have my video on.
How strange.
Maybe you should put a light on in your room.
Yeah.
Maybe you should not broadcast from the donkere kamer.
Well, all right. But anyway, I want to introduce you because for some people who haven't met you before, and I want to also say hello to everybody that somebody has taken the chance to do a walking distance in his home. That's really nice. Hello, Robert. But also to people that I don't know, but I'm very happy that they are there. And I was inspired to ask you to talk about reincarnation, about Gilgul, because I saw you teaching to Africans, to an African tribe that considers itself Jewish. And all the things that you were saying were so interesting. I thought, okay, you can do it for us too.
For sure. Actually, there's supposed to be some of them with us tonight.
What?
There are supposed to be some of them with us tonight.
Are you waiting for them?
Just another minute.
Okay, perfect.
Please.
Agnieszka.
Maybe you can tell something about who they are.
Well, there's one gentleman who I'm hoping will be joining us tonight named Remy, who I've met actually a couple of years ago and had the honor of being involved in his visit here to Israel and learning more about the Igbo, which he pointed out actually it has a phonetic relationship to Ibu or Ivri, Hebrew. And there are various sources that they draw from as to their origins. But those of us here over 60 might remember them, unfortunately. Yeah, I got that, Bob. Oh, really? Might remember them from a more unfortunate name of Biafra.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
Yeah, Biafra.
Yeah.
And the children who are starving.
Yep. Anyhow, long story short, as God in her infinite sense of humor would have it, so I was just going through Facebook. You know, Facebook, it gives you suggestions of people maybe who you might want. And suddenly I see this nice looking woman, and instead of a name, it said Beit Midrash. I was like, what? So it was good it said Beit Midrash because unfortunately I cannot pronounce their names. And when I hear their names, it's like little musical snippets. It's really quite beautiful, but being linguistically challenged, I haven't been able to succeed at it. But the classes take place through Zoom in their Beit Midrash in Enugu, Nigeria. And so we are now involved in going over some really basic ideas, primary Jewish concepts, of course, like reincarnation and and other basic ideas. And we are trying to hook them up with some of the organizations that help bring agricultural technology into their community. So that should be able to help them increase their water supplies and food growing capabilities. We are also in the middle of trying to collect talis, that we can send to their community for them to be able to have to wear. I have 2 so far, and they're just awesome. But you know what? I gotta tell you, since a few of us here are over 60, and I'm gonna judge maybe some of us were even deep into rock and roll back in the day, you probably remember a group called Canned Heat. And one of the songs of Canned Heat was "Good People All Over the World," and it's really true. I mean, just look at you guys, how beautiful you are. And it's every time now I see you, I feel like I'm with my mishpacha and my old friends. I mean, without a comma. So it's really, really nice. And, you know, we give the classes in China as well. And people are just amazing, which reminds me of the Gemara. The Gemara says that when the Messiah will come, it'll be bad news for the leaders and good news for the people, because people are really beautiful. And therefore we have this innate capability to create a wonderful world. In Israel, they were talking about the vaccination for the corona. And there was a big popular movement here as to who should get the first tests of the corona. And everyone agreed, although no one went ahead, was that the politicians should be given the first, because
Last.
no, because if they live, then you know the vaccination works, and if they die, then we're all saved.
Good one.
Thank you, guinea pigs, they're called.
Exactly. All right. Anyhow, I'm just going to keep one eye on the side here in terms of admitting people in, because it just keeps kind of coming in, but we should get started anyhow. So I would like to, first of all, just say hello to everybody. And it's really, for those of us that this is not our first time, it's really cool to catch up again. And to those people I don't know yet, I hope you won't regret it and enjoy the class as well. And the second thing is, which is really important, is I have to do a little bit of a disclaimer. And the disclaimer is, Bob, I'm gonna have to just put a little piece of tape over your box.
I thought you said exclaimer.
Exactly. Well, that'll be at the end of this class. But to really teach a class on the Jewish approach to reincarnation, Gilgulim, is not a 1-hour class. It is a course. And to really go into the proper depths and really understanding it is not something that can either be accomplished in an hour, and it's even, you know, not something I know how qualified I am. I mean, one of the things that you learn about learning Torah is the more you learn, the only thing you learn is how little you know. You know, and I think we talked about this actually in the last class. So since you remember that, I don't want to belittle it again, but I'll just say in brief that when we talked about the 3 times in the year of the receiving of the Torah, the ultimate receiving of the Torah was actually on Purim. That was the receiving of the oral Torah. And on the oral Torah was the time when it said, Chaim, on the oral Torah, it says, Kimu v'kiblu, while as in Mount Sinai, it said Nasev v'nishma, meaning we will hear and we will do. Kimu v'kiblu means we will accept that which we have accepted. And in the oral Torah, which is associated with Purim, and Purim, especially in Hasidic literature, is associated with being the holiest day of the year, but that's a whole class in itself. And that's why Yom Kippur, Yom Kippurim, a Yom, a day which is like Purim. So that even Yom Kippur points to Purim. And on Purim, the idea is Ad Shelo Yada, until you don't know. So the highest form of knowledge is not knowing. And not only is it not knowing, but if you think about it, when you rise in your wisdom, it's true, you've grown this much in your wisdom, but now you can see from here even more that you don't know. So mathematically, the amount that you don't know is way more than whatever you gained in this elevation. This is why the format or the modus operandus that Moshe, Musa used to go up on Mount Sinai was humility. Humility in Judaism isn't about, you know, kind of like grubbling in the ground and looking at your toes, because a person can be an egomaniac being humble. You know, he can be so humble, making sure that everybody is seeing how humble he is. So that's not really humble at all. I think I even told you this joke from the famous yeshiva, the Musar yeshiva in Slobodka, where they used to try to break their ego ego, by the way, I think we mentioned this also last time, standing for edging God out. So they try to break their ego by coming in the study hall, and for a half hour every day they would do a Jewish mantra, and it would be like, I'm nothing, I'm nothing. And one day this poor Shlemiel comes in to the yeshiva, never been to yeshiva in his life, and he's like 500 guys there chanting, I'm nothing. And so, you know, when you're in Slobodka, do like Slobodka. So he pulls up the chair and he sits down, and he's chanting, I'm nothing, I'm nothing. Sorry, not Slobodka, Navardic. And he's saying, I'm nothing, until all of a sudden one of the older guys turns around and says to his friend, look at this guy. He walks in the door in 5 minutes, he thinks he's nothing. So a person can be very arrogant in being nothing. So the real idea of Jewish humility is not about being nothing, it's about being something. Now, something is a challenge, because you can be on an ego high by thinking you're nothing, or you can be on an ego high by thinking you're everything. And actually you are everything. And it's okay to think that you're everything, as long as you remember the person next to you is also everything. But in the meantime, just to be a anything, just to be a something, or even better, just to be yourself, that's really the goal. So therefore, if you have a great skill, rather than thinking of oneself as being elevated above others because you are a great pianist or you are a master mathematician or whatever, a humble person would see the skill as a gift, as a tool through which they have been empowered to help build a better world. That's all. You know, I remember, I know it'd be hard to believe, but I remember back in the 60s when I was a hippie, and there was we had a radical Weatherman SDS monthly magazine that came to Syracuse University, which is where I was. And one of the cartoons changed my life. It was a bunch of people in a pit, in a hole, and they're all trying to climb out of the hole, but nobody can climb out of the hole. And then after a while, someone starts to teach them how to levitate, and they get off the ground like about, you know, maybe a half a foot, you know, that's about it, but no one gets out of the hole. And then one moment, somebody says, well, why don't we help each other? And they all get out of the hole. So, you know, when you realize that we are all on this planet together, we're all in this hole, if you will. So then by realizing that what I don't have and you have, and what I have and you don't have, together makes us greater, right? For example, one of the mathematical fallacies is that 1 + 1 = 2. Really, 1 + 1 should be greater than 2, because as 1 + 1, the creation of what it creates is greater, if you will, than that which is merely 2. So as a whole, as a collective, as a community, we have tremendous ability to be able to help elevate ourselves. So anyhow, all that was just being in a way to say that I'm happy to approach this class. I just hope that the only thing I really hope that will come out of this class is that you'll come away with more questions than answers. You know, my Rebbe always taught me better a good question than a bad answer. And anybody who's ever learned Talmud will know that it's all built upon questions. But again, questions you got to make sure are not answers. Somebody comes over to me and says, where was God during the Holocaust? Even though that sentence may have a question mark at the end of the question, it's a question as to whether or not it was really a question. It could be a statement disguised as a question. So therefore, our questions have to really be questions because we really want to know. And whenever we find out the answer, we should not be satisfied, because all the answer does is give us a platform to ask another question and to keep going, to keep going. This is why every book of the Talmud, or I should say the Babylonian Talmud, not like the Jerusalem Talmud, but the Babylonian, begins on page 2. Because as my rabbi always said, you shouldn't even think you know Aleph. You don't know anything. So therefore, you're already on page 2 and you don't even know where the beginning was. So anyhow, that's Talmud, but we're here to learn Kabbalah, so that's a little bit different. So going into the world of reincarnation, it's kind of interesting. I don't know much about the outside the Torah Kabbalah world of reincarnation, but I have heard that there are people you can pay money to, and they will help you go back, and discover who you were in earlier incarnations. And I always found that fascinating, because the handful of people I've met who've ever done that, I always notice that the one common denominator, and I'm talking about people I met in China who did it, people I know one guy in Australia, somebody in California, probably everybody in California, but I met one of them. And the thing that's really interesting, if all these people who were discovering their earlier lives, none of them were the janitor in the library. I mean, like, what happened to him? He doesn't come back, right? Everybody was like Princess Walla Walla, or I mean, like, those are the only people who are reincarnated, or is it like, you know, you're gonna have, you demand your money? Well, look, yes, I have looked into your soul. I've read the lines in your hand. I've checked the lines on your forehead and so on. And yeah, you were in the castle, but you were the guy who shoveled the manure and the horse. I mean, right? You're not going to pay money for that. So I always find that kind of funny. That's just one thing. And we're not going to even touch that, or maybe I already touched it too much. But that's just the whole separate world, which I said I don't know much about. And the little I do, it's just kind of always found me as, I don't know, funny. But you're going to find actually that the Jewish approach to Gilgulim, to reincarnation, is really not a pleasant one. It's not a positive one, let's say that in the least, but it's certainly not a pleasant one. It's not an elevating experience. It's a rectifying experience. It's a healing experience. And the way I built our class for the evening, we're going to start off and work through 3 levels, so that I even prepared to go inside with you to read you from the Zohar of the primary source of reincarnation. Although in texts themselves, the most famous, of course, is the Arizal's work called Shari Gilgolim, which means the gates of the reincarnations. And in the world of Kabbalah and other literature, there's endless information, both about how the processes work and even about who is a reincarnation of who. So, for example, in the mystical literature, we know the famous, in biblical literature, we know the famous story of Cain and Abel, and Cain kills Abel, right? So according to the Kabbalah, the reincarnation of Cain and Abel was, since Cain was the one who killed and Abel was the one who was killed, so now Abel is reincarnated as Moses, and Cain is reincarnated as the Egyptian that Moses killed. But we're not going to go into that tonight in terms of the who's who of reincarnations. But there are the books even of the who's who. In fact, one of the greatest Kabbalistic books, which people are maybe not familiar with, and it's not so accessible, is actually a book called the Book of Adam, that is ascribed its authorship to Adam. I mean, the only text that we know that we have or believe we have from Adam is the Psalm, which we say on Shabbat, called it's a Shir Shel Yom, the song of the day of Shabbat, Mizmor Shir Liyom HaShabbat. And that song is attributed to, its authorship rather, is attributed to Adam. However, there was a book of Adam. And in the book of Adam, it says that in that book were all of the souls of every human being that would ever be created. And in the Zohar, it says that when a person after 120 years goes to heaven, so the person at the gate is not St. Peter, it's actually Adam, because Adam greets each aspect of the soul. Because I don't know if you had this in Amsterdam, but in America, we used to have a great candy called Turkish taffy. And it came in a wrapper, and Turkish taffy, you had to smack it. And then when you opened the wrapper, it was all these little pieces. So I always think of that in a way that the whole Turkish taffy was Adam's soul. And when he then broke the vessel of light, his soul splintered, and all the fragments of those souls, of those pieces of the soul, became souls of all the human beings that would ever live. So therefore, there's an element of creation where each one of these souls, when it now goes back up to heaven, is coming back into the vessel of light, which is actually Adam's soul. However, on a deeper level, the soul of Adam itself is also talked about as 3 incarnations. And it's symbolized in the name in Hebrew, of course, Adam, which is in Hebrew, it's Aleph, Daled, Mem, or if we can use the English, A-D-M. And the A or the Aleph stands for Adam himself. The D or Dalet stands for David, as in King David. And the M or Mem stands for Mashiach, because according to the Zohar, King David was never going to be born. And when Adam saw all of the souls of creation, and he saw that David was not going to be born, he took 70 years of his life, which is why he died at 930 years old instead of 1,000 years. And those 70 years are the 70 years of King David's life. So that's just one example of the element of how the soul works. And the interesting thing about the soul, now dipping down for a minute into the Arizal, and then we're going to go back to the order of the class itself, is that the Arizal writes, and the Ramak and many other great Kabbalists writes, that the soul of a person is kind of like the hand of a person. The idea of a hand, if you think about it, it has the hand itself, and then it has 5 fingers. Now, the soul, in a way, would be, let's call it the kaf, the palm. And the fingers would be the soul that dips down into the body. So therefore, each element of the soul is coming down into different bodies in different periods and different times, but it's really all developing, hey, little baby, it's all developing a hand. It's all like one soul. That little baby could probably give the class better than me because he or she just came from there. Fresh information. Sorry, a beautiful little baby just showed up on the screen.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
You said something about St. Peter. Was he Jewish?
I don't know. I was only joking because that's normally, I think that's the name of the guy.
He was.
He was.
He was.
Okay.
Of course he was.
Okay, his friends knew him as Itzy. But for the public, he was Peter, you know. Anyhow, so this idea of the soul, therefore, they are components which come down into each body, but really it's all one soul. This is when the Arizal talks about that there are very, very few new souls which are coming down into the world, but rather souls which have been here before, of course, in a different shape and form. We're going to get into that, I promise you, God willing, a little bit later. But what I want to show you is a perspective of how we enter this body of knowledge by breaking this down into 3 levels. The first level is the written Torah, what we call the Bible, the Chumash, or the Tanakh. The second level, which sits on it and therefore comes from a higher level, although ironically, it's not easy to be Jewish. Okay. The higher level, which is really a lower level, is the oral Torah. And on top of the oral Torah is call it the world of Kabbalah. And each one nurses from the other. Now, the reason I was saying about the higher level, which is the lower level, is because in the Zohar, heaven is the written Torah and earth is the oral Torah. So therefore, it would seem that it's lower because it's below the written Torah. But it's actually higher because it's able to come deeper. In other words, something which is more spiritually evolved is able to penetrate deeper into the physical in order to be able to inoculate the physical with the intensity of spirituality. That's really the goal. This idea of the inoculation of the physical with spirituality is the symbol of the Star of David. The Star of David, as Jews, because we do not believe in idols, we do not represent the power of delta, but rather double delta. Donna, did you want to ask something? I'm sorry. No? Okay. I thought I heard a sound. Sorry. So double delta, therefore, is the idea of the one star, half of the star coming down, the other half of the star going up. And that idea, therefore, is Earth looking to find spiritual reckoning, and the spiritual world looking to impregnate the physical world. So therefore, the idea of the oral law coming down into this world is because it creates a phenomenal partnership of humans with God, that the divinity can actually find a conduit through the human experience, which is the most challenging, because there's nothing which blocks divine light more than humanity. Or mankind, as it used to be called, or my grandfather Avashalom used to call it man unkind. So there's nothing which blocks that light more than the human. Therefore, when the human is able to be a conduit of light, that is the greatest reflection or expression of divinity in the physical world. And therefore, what we'll find now is in the written Torah, especially the 5 books of Moses, there's almost no mention of anything of the spiritual nature. There's no discussion of heaven. There's maybe one reference to hell, and even that's only if you really understand Rashi's explanation of a verse. It's not explicit in the verse. There is nothing for sure that talks about reincarnation, and especially not about incarnation, or especially not resurrection of the dead. The written Torah is only focusing on the job to be done living in this world. The written Torah is in this world. It's very nice that you and I want to be out there in wah wooga wooga mystical land, but God wants you not to steal. God wants you not to hit your neighbor. God wants you to feed the poor. That's, if you don't have that, you don't have anything. But once you have that, you can have everything. But if you don't have the basic sense of what we are to do as human beings on our planet, then everything else is just fluff. But once you have that, then you have a platform, you have a grounder from where you can go into the infinite. So therefore, the actual Torah that God gives Moses is a focus on what we do in our limited time on this world. It is to create a sober experience, to realize that we do not live forever. And that is not a frightening concept. That's a beautiful concept, because rather than fearing death, we should fear not living. That's what we should be afraid of. So many people waste their lives fearing that they're going to die. They're already dead. A person should fear more not living. A person should feel more that they have these amazing blessings inside of them. Maybe they're a poet, who knows? Maybe they're a scientist, who knows? But this blessing of life that's in them, if they don't express that, if they don't live that, that's something to be afraid of. So this is the Torah comes along to focus us on that. Once we get deeper into the books of Tanakh, there are a few little stories which do touch upon the transcendental. Obviously, there's the classical story of dry bones, where the resurrection of the dead that was performed by the prophet Ezekiel, Yecheskel. And there's also the story of Samuel, Shmuel Navi, who I always like to say, because this is called a home court advantage, who's just buried over there. So Shmuel Navi, Samuel, was brought back by a witch from the dead because King Saul wanted to talk to him. So that's really where you have a couple little in the written Torah, but only in the Tanakh, stories of things of life after death and how they manifest themselves. That all changes when we move up to the next element of the Talmud. The Talmud, as you know, is broken into 2 primary parts. One is the legal aspect, and the other is what we call the Agadah. The Agadah from the word lagid, like you say on Passover, magid, to speak. So Agadah are the stories that are told. Now the stories which are told, similar to Hasidic Torah, are analogies. They take very, very deep ideas and use metaphor. In fact, with the Igbo, yesterday, we were talking about this. It's really, I mean, with you guys, you're Europeans, but it's really kind of cool to be talking to these beautiful West African Igbo and trying to explain to them about certain Hasidic rebbes in Eastern Europe 200 years ago. It's like, whoop. Anyhow, one of them was known as the Maggid of Dubno. I'm sure you've heard of his name. And the Maggid of Dubno was very famous because he always had the perfect analogy, mashal, for anything he wanted to talk about. And there's a famous story that's always told. They asked him, how is it that no matter what we're talking about, you have the perfect analogy? How do you do it? So he revealed his secret. He said, I take a bow and I take an arrow, and I shoot the arrow into the tree. And after the arrow goes into the tree, I then paint the bullseye around it. Now, that sounds like a cute story, right? It's a cute story. And that's why he always gets a bullseye, because he paints the bullseye after he shot the arrow. But if you really understand the Maggid of Dubno, it's true, it's a cute story. That's hardly what he is meaning to say. There's something much, much deeper for us to learn about what he is saying. It's a difference in our lives, how we view things as a reference of objective reality versus subjective perspective. When a person has a bullseye, a target that is already painted, it's as if one is saying, I know what the goal is. I know where I'm going. You know, I used to always love to quote one of my early rabbis, John Lennon of the Beatles, because he always used to say, life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans. So we all know where we're going, right? Right? Go back to when you were 18 years old. I don't care who you are on this video. Go back to 18 years old and tell me if what you're doing right now is exactly what you had in mind when you were 18. I doubt it. So therefore, we set up those targets. This is what I'm going to do. This is where it is. That's what the bullseye is all about. And then we missed the mark. We missed. His point is, don't do that. Don't do that. Go into life. See where the arrow hits. Because where the arrow hits, that is the bullseye. And now by going and looking at the arrow where it hit, now you can do discovery. You can be a scientist observing objectively what has happened and what is happening rather than what I thought is happening or I had wished to happen. So that's what the Maggid was saying. The way to understand what's captured inside an analogy is by first really going and understanding what it's saying, not what we want to hear. So the Agadah captures many, many deep ideas, which require education and a teacher to be able to unfold. But on the level of Talmud, there right away, there are things which are taken for granted. For example, resurrection of the dead. The resurrection of the dead is not only like a kind of wild mystical idea, the Rambam codifies it as one of the 13 principles of Jewish faith. Ani mamim b'emunah shlema b'tchiyat hametim. I believe with complete faith in the resurrection of the dead. And in the generation of dry bones, the reason Ezekiel, Yecheskel performed an act of resurrecting the dead is because in that generation, people no longer believed in it. So he had to say, look, here it is. This is the resurrection of the dead. And the Talmud is so bothered by the fact that this idea of the resurrection is such a primary Jewish idea that it's not mentioned in the written Torah. It goes to great lengths to find where it is written in the Torah. Now, to say this, I need to just roll it back a little bit and tell you something I'm sure many of you are familiar with, which is referred to in English as the Garden of Esoteric Knowledge, or in Hebrew, Pardes. Pardes means like I guess a garden, for lack of better translation. But Pardes really means that there are 4 levels, which actually relate to 4 of the 5 worlds of creation. So I'm going to just run through for those of you that aren't familiar. So you have Pardes, the first or the lowest level or the simplest level is called Pshat, the simple meaning of something, right? Pshat is, let me think of an analogy. Pshat is you know how to use a mobile phone. That's Pshat. The next level, if you follow the sounds, par, R is R for remez. A remez is a hint. That's how they translate it. I like a better word. I like to call it a nuance. A nuance is if you don't see my face right now, but you just hear me talking, that's pshat. But when you see my facial expressions, even though I'm still saying the same words, an eyebrow, a movement of the head, a wink, something, a hand gesture, these are called the hints, the ramazim. And the ramazim are the things that help you understand the simple level on a deeper level. So in our analogy, if the simple level is you know how to use a mobile phone, So the Ramazim, these are things like gematrias and different things of this nature. These are the people who know how to fix a mobile phone, which is not me. Okay, I know how to use a phone. I don't know how to fix a phone. Then you come to the next level, which is the drush. Beit Midrash, the house of drush. Drush means to dig, to discover, to go beneath the surface. Drush requires a lot of effort, a lot of application, a lot of dedication to get to that deeper level of drush. That level of drush, if you will, that would be like if this is the user and this is the fix-it guy, this is the guy who writes code. He knows how to write code and embed it into your phone and into the satellite. So all the magic that's actually happening in a blink of a second of billions of people simultaneously using phones with pinpoint accuracy all around the world, if you just understand phones alone will blow your mind. That's that guy. He's the guy who's able to go into the level of drush and to be able to pull out what the metaphors were referring to. And the highest or the deepest level is Sod. Sod is the foundation. These are the guys, maybe there are only 100 in the world, who actually can build the architecture of telephony, how to build a complete GSM system. Those are the guys who are like the Sod upon which everything else happens. And if something's going from 3G to 4G to 5G, the people who understand the actual secrets of everything, the foundations, those are the ones that make that happen. These four levels of Pardes are also the four worlds of creation. Actually, there's five, but the fifth one is perpendicular to the other four, because the fifth one, which is the highest one, is called Yechidi, which comes from the word Yichud, which means oneness. And since it's perfect oneness, it's almost absolutely impossible to discuss, because using words are little vessels. In fact, that's what the word means in Hebrew. Teva means word. It also means Noah's Ark was a teva. They're little vessels that take droplets of your soul when it comes out of your body and travels with them in the form of a word. But words can't begin to describe absolute unity, because there's no words to chip off a piece of it, because if you could, it wouldn't be the absolute unity. So therefore, the highest level, which goes all the way to the throne of God, permeates through all the other four levels of the Pardes. But these four worlds, they are coming from the highest to the lowest. The first one of them is called Yitzilat, which is to illuminate. It's the illumination, and it's the place in which the soul, the neshama, is the highest. Under that is called the Bria, the world of creation. Bereshis or Bereshit, Bara Elokim, right? Think about that sentence for a minute, because we're going to go into this now as we get deeper into the Zohar component as well. Bereshit Bara Elokim is wrong. It should say Elokim Bereshit, or Elokim Bore Bereshit. It should be God created this thing called Bereshit. But if you read the sentence, it doesn't say that. There's a thing called Bereshit, which created God. Whoa, that's pretty heavy, right? So now, what this really means is a very, very deep idea. When we talk about God in Hebrew, we use multiple names. So the name of God is Elohim, is the numerical value, again, now on the level of Remez, to the word Ha-Teva, which means the world of nature. So Elohim is also in modern Hebrew as a non-holy word. Elohim means a judge. So Elohim or Elohim Acharim, other gods, right? Idols, other gods. You never hear Hashem Acharim, right? You never hear the name God as Hashem, other Hashems. Nobody says that. The only application where you hear other gods is only using the name of Elohim, but not using the name of Hashem. Obviously, so therefore, if it's an idol, it's Elohim Acharim, and if it's God, it's Elohim. But it's Elohim on a playing field of forces that are controlling forces, be they angels, be they zodiac, mazal, and so on. All these forces which control other forces are called Elohim. There's the holy Elohim, which is Elokim. That's the one that rides above all others. That's why there is none but that Elohim. And when you understand that, then you understand it's because it's really Hashem. Hashem is Elokeinu, and Hashem is Echad. He's only one. But in the level of Elohim or Elohim, if there are other gods, even a human being could become an Elohim as a judge, as a shofet. So on that level, when God created the world, Yud Ke Vav Ke, Hashem creates something called creation, which is Bereshit. And this creation creates an aspect of God which will now be known as Elohim. So it is Bereshit, which is bara, which is creating Hashem, but not Hashem. It's creating God as Elohim. And it's not creating God as Elohim because it's God, Yud Ke Vav Ke, which now creates a new theater in which God in this theater plays the role of Elohim. Now, the Zohar goes deeper and it analyzes the word Bereshit. And the word Bereshit is bara shet. Shet in Hebrew is 6. So what God created is Vav, the Hebrew letter for 6. Now, what does that mean? God created bara shet. This is the Zohar talking. What does this mean? And I'm taking the time now to explain this to you so that we'll understand the levels of the soul. And from there, then we will understand as a background, reincarnations. So what does it mean that God creates 6? So in the physical world which we live in, it's 6-sided, right? This is, again, the Star of David with its 6 outer points. This is the cube, which is north, east, west, south, up and down, 6 sides of the cube. And the center point is, of course, Shabbat, the 7th point. But this idea, therefore, God created this 3-dimensional or 4-dimensional with time, or as Jews, we refer to the world as 5-dimensional because there's the moral dimension. The moral dimension is the idea of spiritual cause and effect. In the physical world, there's cause and effect. If you light a candle, you get a flame. But in the spiritual world, if you light a spiritual light, you remove spiritual darkness from the world. There is cause and effect. Schar va'onish, reward and punishment. So this is the 5th dimension, not to be confused with a music group, but this is the 5th dimension which we understand cause and effect by our actions. And because there's cause and effect, there's responsibility and there's reward. And that's all part of what we live in this world, of a world of judgment, in a world in which we try to be able to elevate ourselves as one who plays the game in a way where we win. What's called winning? So in Hebrew, the word for world is olam. Olam comes from the word alam, which means hidden. So when you make a blessing and you say, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech ha'olam, which translates into king of the world, what it really would be more apropos, bless you, what it would really be more apropos is to call it the king of the hidden. Now, how does it become hidden? Well, this is hinted at in the first letter of the Torah, Bet of Bereshit. Bet is the number 2. So God created other. And therefore, by creating other, you now had 2 elements. You had the oneness of God and the other. Think of it as a circle. You have the center and the circumference. The circumference is everything other than, and the center is the one. And therefore, the free will of the human mind is now to live in a world where everything is dual. You have the atom, which everything is built upon, atoms, and every atom has to have a positive, negative balance of equal value. Otherwise, you have a nuclear bomb. And then you have the ADAM, which are the atoms, the human beings. And then we also try to strive for equilibrium. To be a holy person is WHOLLY, to balance the soul and the body, not to be off balance, one from the other. So the atoms and the atoms are ones that are always looking to find the even keel to have that kind of balance. So in this world of duality, you have this side and you have that side. When you see this side, this part is hidden. When you see this part is hidden. So God hides the Aleph by dressing or wrapping in a talus, which is the metaphor of the Kabbalah, and hides inside this world. Our job is to find God. That's our job. I don't know if you had this growing up in Holland, but in New York, as a kid, we used to play hide and go seek. I hated it.
Up at you.
I hated it because what happened would be there'd be one guy who would like, he'd be the guy who everyone else had to run and hide. And he'd be the guy that like, okay, I'm not looking, go and hide, and then they would go and they'd find everybody, but they would never look for me. And I'd still be hiding like inside a garbage thing, right, for 3 hours. Everyone's home, they're already watching the Yankees on TV, but like, so I had a problem with the game hide and go seek. But anyhow, so in a certain way, that's maybe what God feels like. God hides and we don't seek him. That's really bad. In fact, the Zohar says that it's even worse. Not only did God hide, but there's a double, Esther, there's a double hidden, meaning God not only hides, but God hides from us that God is even hidden. So it's like a double layer we have to penetrate to get through. So how do we do that? So watch this, it's really interesting. The Zohar tells us that the world was created in 10 utterances. If you go and open your Bible, you will see, and God said, and God said, and God said, but you're only going to find 9. Number 9, where is the 10th? So the 10th is Bereshit bara Elokim, the first. But the first was before there was sound. So we don't hear and God said. But these were the 10 creations. And when a person was in complete harmony with creation, they could hear these sounds. This is what Abraham was all about. He could hear the 10 sounds of creation. But as man's confusion, or woman and people's confusion, began to fill up this beautiful sound of music of creation, as cholesterol created constriction in the soul of people, they couldn't hear the sound anymore. So the only way to remove that sound was to take out, as they do in Asia, a bong. I have to say qualify Asia because I know bongs in Amsterdam is something else. But a bong in Asia, they would take the bong and they would ring it, and it would give off an amazing vibration. So God then hits the world 10 times. These are the 10 plagues of Egypt. And each one of these 10 plagues is in juxtaposition to each one of the 10 utterances. So each time there was a bang, it removed the dust to be able to reveal the sound of creation, except it was in reverse order. So that the 10th of the 10 utterances corresponded to the first of the 10 commandments, which is not tonight's class. So I don't want to spend much time on that, but you'll see where I'm going with this. Then after that, now that the 10 utterances had been released again, they could now be reinstated as the 10 commandments. But the 10 commandments now would be in their erect or right position. Now, why is this and what's happening? The answer to this is the way the human eye works. If you think about the human eye, it's really kind of crazy. The eye sees an object, and then at the retina turns the object upside down, and by the time the image is in the brain, puts the object right side up again. Why? What's that all about? Just look and see. Look and see. One of my favorite Gary Larson cartoons from Far Side are 2 polar bears standing in an igloo, and he's holding the igloo up in the air, and you see a little Eskimo running away for dear life. And one polar bear says to the other, "What was so complicated? I lift, you grab. I lift, you grab," right? So why isn't sight just simple? You see it, you see it. Why does it go up, down, and up? And the answer is the same idea of the 10 commandments. Because to grasp what we see requires thought. It requires process. It requires grinding. It requires working on it. And that's why in Hebrew, the word ro'eh, to see, is connected to the word ir'eh, which is to have awe of God. To play hide and go seek with God you will not see it with your naked eye. You have to process through wisdom and open your third eye to be able to see what's in front of your eyes. And that's why the first letter of the 10 Commandments is an Aleph. Because through the 10 Commandments, we have the ability to see through the facade and reveal the Aleph again. And the letter Bet of creation, when unified with the letter Aleph of Anochi, is the Hebrew word Ba, which means to arrive, to come. Bo-rega, come, bo-rega. That's what it means, to come to God. So now if that's the whole process, and God creates this number 6, how does the game work? So the game works as follows.
Can I interrupt for a sec?
For sure.
Because I'm not too sure what this has to do with reincarnation.
Oh, yeah, I know, but you will be shortly.
Okay.
Or not so shortly, but soon.
In your next lifetime.
Exactly. You know, somebody once said to me that when you're going out and your wife says, I'll be ready in 5 minutes, it's the same 5 minutes as when your wife calls you and you say, I'll be home in 5 minutes. So the whole concept of time is another world. Okay, so I thank you, Rabbi Tamar. I will try to streamline this. I'll just talk faster. So
I have been reincarnated.
so the idea of the 6 refer to the 6 active sphirot of creation. They are the upper torso and the lower torso. They are kindness, strength, and balance. And then on the hips and the genitals, they are splendor. And on the other side, eternity. And in the middle, the genitals, which is futility or fertility. And these 6 are the 6 directions. In other words, instead of thinking of them as the 6 days of creation, you can realize that every Sunday is a day of chesed, followed by a day of gevura, followed by a day of tiferet. And the more you read about what the days and what were created on the days, you will see an amazing revelation of each one of these sfirot. The neshama, the soul, has to go and open each one of these channels until the flow comes through the genitals as the sod and mates and reproduces with the queen, which is Malchut. So therefore, the crown, which is the highest level, has a conduit through the human experience till ultimately the crown sits on the head of the queen, which is Malchut. And the soul, until it does that, does not allow that flow of the crown to go into the kingdom, then the body or the soul has to come back and come back and come back until it gets it right. That's the challenge of the soul. That's the game we play. That's the hide and go seek. That's the facility of how it works. That's the background to this class. You know, Rabbi Tamar, I have to just tell you, the Maharal says on the book of Kohelet, I forgot what they call that in English, if it's Ecclesiastics, I think. So the measure says, or sorry, the Maharal says that the entire book is an introduction. And in the whole book are the last 2 sentences. Kol ha'adam, the whole purpose of a person is to fear God and to do his will in this world. But unless you went through the whole book of Kohelet, you wouldn't be ready for that. So maybe this class, we had to do all of that as a background to now we can submerge into this world of reincarnation, understanding as follows. According to the Kutzker Rebbe, I mean, not according to him, but the way the Kutzker Rebbe explains, he says that after a person dies and goes upstairs, you're gonna have 3 options. One is to go to heaven, but chances of you getting that, forget about it. So don't even dream about it. So you're already down to 2. And those 2 are either to go to hell or to be reincarnated. And the Kutzker says, pray for hell. Because hell, it might be hell, right? I always like to say that at least one thing in hell is, nobody ever says in hell, wait a minute, whoa, how are you judging me? I want my lawyer. Nobody says that because usually the lawyer is probably right there already, right? So, but the idea is that when a person's in hell, everything that's happening to them They agree. Because you can't play poker up there. There's no fake left, go right. There's no move the ball behind your back and come up behind the board and sink the, there's none of that. Everything is transparent, especially the stuff you spent most of your life trying to hide from others, let alone from yourself. It's all transparent. There are no games. It's complete emet. It's total truth. And while that might sound really frightening, if you lived a life of seeking truth, it's quite inviting. It's very rewarding. It's very refreshing. You know why? Because if you spend a life learning to love yourself and to realize you have no better friend in this world than yourself, and to realize there'll never be another person in this world who will spend as much time with you as yourself, then you will have embraced yourself. And if you embrace yourself and you love yourself and you live that love and share that love with everyone around you, then you will be embraced above. Because as you will be above is as you are now. It's not a game, it's not a lottery. You pick out a, oh, wow, I win, I go to heaven. No, you earn it. It's yours. And if you didn't, then hell is rehab. Imagine you put a dirty shirt into a washing machine and all of a sudden you like, it's over, the bell rings and you open it up and you see the two sleeves holding their hands like this. No, not another rinse, right? It's dirty. You went, oh, okay, come on out dirty, right? So the soul has to be purified to be able to move beyond the Van Allen belt that engulfs this world. And for that soul to be able to do it, there's two ways to do it. It could either go through the intensive Marine boot camp of hell, and believe me, they don't call it hell for nothing, right? But at least one is aware of what's happening, and then they're through the process, or it comes back into this world. It comes back in a new incarnation. And depending on what it is given a perfectly scripted story, crafted parents, relatives, country, time, and space, so that it will be in the perfect environment to do tikkun. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov points out that on Tisha B'Av, we have a special book called Kinot, which means to cry or to mourn. But the letters that spell Kinot are the same letters that spell tikkun. So if you believe you can break it, you can believe you can fix it. It's in your hands. Even the awesome evil, or not evil, the awesome, horrible punishment called chorus, which is where the soul is cut off from heaven. It's okay, because who cut off the soul but ourselves? We did it. It wasn't some whim of God to cut our souls. We cut our own souls off. So guess what? Put it back. It's in your hands. Put it back. As long as you're alive, the shot clock is still ticking. Everything you put through the hoops counts. You're alive. There's an amazing story of a rabbi, or not a rabbi, a man who was a connoisseur of prostitutes. That's all he did. It's a Gemara, by the way. If you want some of the coolest stories ever, learn Gemara. And this particular this person went maybe he was, we went all around just finding the best prostitutes in the world. He finally found Cleopatra, whoever it was. And at the moment of culmination, a voice comes out of heaven and says, just as that has left your body, you will never return, so too have you now reached a point of no return. You're finished. You'll never go to heaven. He freaks out. He runs to the mountains, to the sun, to the stars, asks everyone to pray for him, and everybody's not interested. Finally, he sits down, puts his head between his knees, and he cries until he dies. And a voice comes from heaven and says, welcome, Rabbi so-and-so. What's the lesson? In a split second, he captured the essence of life. So as long as we're alive, we can change everything for the best. But if we don't, then we come back. Now, how do we come back? So there's an interesting thing about Down syndrome children or Down syndrome people. In Jewish tradition, people with Down syndrome are viewed as some of the highest, most refined, holy souls in the world. And God, I'm sure if you've ever met anyone who is a Down, you realize you're not talking to a mortal. You're talking to an angel that happens to be in a body. Their joy, their light. We have a lot to learn from people with Down syndrome. But there was a great rabbi known as the Chazon Ish of the last generation. And every time somebody with Down syndrome came into his room, the rabbi would stand up for him because he recognized the holiness of the soul. Now, the body of the Down syndrome is such so that the amount of time that the soul has to spend in this world for whatever its rectification is, won't lose what it accomplished. And this is what the Kutzker was afraid of, because when you come back into this world, a person can actually lose what they have already gained rather than gaining what they're still missing. That's the danger of being down here. So those which are very holy souls that have very little tikkun, that are still reincarnated as humans, could be on the level of a Down syndrome. But reincarnation goes beyond human. People can be reincarnated as animals. This was part of the offerings that were taking place in the Beit HaMikdash. These were reincarnations, and the process of the animal was the releasing of their souls, and they used to talk to them and they knew what they were, and so on and so on. But that's not for tonight. And reincarnation goes beyond that. It even goes into rock, into stone, into inanimate material. Yismach Moshe, who was a great Makubal, talks about that reincarnation, even in the Olam Domeh, the world, the silent world, we call it, of the world of solid matter. How does that work? So there are two aspects to life. There is how something lives, and then there is why something lives. How something lives is a human being, breathes air, has vascular system, respiratory system, and all of the rest of it. You move into a plant, it's got xylem and phloem, different aspects. How it lives is different than how a human being lives. But why it lives is all the same, because it's in the focus of God. Because God focuses on something, it exists. The minute God doesn't focus on something, it doesn't exist. So therefore, while the nature of a stone is different than that of a plant, which is different than that of an animal, which is different than that of a human, they all live. Why? Because they're in the focus of God. So therefore, whatever this means, the energy of the soul in this world is all about finding the place in space and time that allows it to be able to exist. Now, how long it exists, why it exists, these are all very, very deep ideas. But how do we know, however, what I'm telling you is the aspect of this reincarnation, and is something that reincarnation is about trying to rectify and finish the work of the Boroshesh, the 6 elements of the Sfirot, to allow the energy to finally complete its process. So in the Zohar, the first place, or not the first place, but the real source that's always used as the is in Parshas Mishpatim. You have the prior parsha or section of the Torah before this is the book of Jethro. So Jethro is the story, of course, which has the giving of the Torah. The chapter that comes immediately after it is the chapter called Judgment. Mishpat in Hebrew is a judge or a judgment. Mishpatim are laws, if you will. So it starts on Elu Mishpatim, which is very, very deep in Kabbalah, and I'll share with you a little bit, because this word Elu, these, is a magical word. The numerical value of the word Ela, is 36. Aleph is 1, Lamed is 30, and Hey is 5. So together it's 36. This word, these, Ela, are the 36 hours of the great light before it became the Or HaGanuz, before the light was hidden, were the first 36 hours of creation, which is why when you count from the word Bereshit, 36 words, you come to the word light. So these are the 36 words. That's why the candles of Hanukkah burn for 36 hours, Sachakol in total. And these are the things that God created. Now, there are 2 levels of God's name. One is the level of the word me in Hebrew, not English. Me is mem yud. It means who. Who is the highest name of God. It's even above yud ke vav ke. And this is hinted at in a verse that we say, okay, as soon as I got to say that, whoop, right out of my ear. Imamanos tishma ka mi amod. If God will if God will keep our sins, who will stand for us? Like if God is so upset that he's like holding on to our sins and demanding an accounting, we're finished. Who's going to stand up for us to God? However, the Baal Shem Tov explains as follows. If a person has sinned so horrifically that even the letter of Yud K, the highest name of God, is still looking at that sin, don't worry. Because me, Hashem as me, Ya'amod, he, the highest name of God, will always be there for us no matter what. Mem Yud is higher than Yud K. And when Mem Yud is the highest, it's the Keter, it's the crown. And when that Mem Yud comes down into this world of the physical, then Mem Yud with the Ele, these things that God makes are the letters Elohim. So therefore, what it means is no matter where we are in the world, even when we're dealing with a hidden God, we always have the instant ability to connect to the highest level of the Ein Sof, of the infinite aspect of God. But nonetheless, while we're within this world of judgments, unless we access that, so this world of Eile Mishpatim, the Zohar translates, here I'll just, I use, by the way, if you ever want to really learn the Zohar, I recommend that was an amazing rabbi known as the Ashlag, who lived in the 1950s in Eretz Israel, known as, in his commentaries called the Sulam. If you know what the Kahati is on Mishnayos, he's like the Kahati on Zohar. It just makes it very easy to read and to flow. And so I'll just help go through this as well. I'm going to just use him because it's in Hebrew, it's easier to translate. So on this chapter, the Patach Rabbi Shimon, which of course is referring to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, he opens up this parsha and he says, sorry, since we're going into the esoteric, I need my little helper here. You know, there was a time in my life I used to wear glasses to see, and then I had to take off my glasses to see, and then I have to wear glasses to hear. It's like a whole new thing. So as the letters get smaller, I gotta like fish them out. So anyhow, that's much better. Pasach Rabbi Shimon, Va'omar, and he says, De'ela amishpatim, these are the judgments, asher tasim lefeinehem. These are the judgments. This is just a quote of the Torah. These are the judgments which are placed before them. Hatargum, the translation of this is, V'ilen dine dehasadik kadmehun. These are the judgments that are placed in order before them. Eluhem sidurim shel gilgul. These are the orders of the incarnations. And this is where the whole world of reincarnation stems from. Ki mishpatim pirushu dinim, because mishpat, judgments, means laws. Tahayinu dinim, judgments, shel nishamot, the judgment, of the soul. Hachozeret hagigelet, which comes back and is reincarnated. Like Gilgal comes from the word gal, like in Hebrew, gal is to surf, a wave, or to roll also. La'olam hazeh, the souls which come back into this world. And it goes on much more, but I want to explain something about the word Gilgal and tie it into this as well. The root of the word Gilgal is really just the double word of gal, Gilgal, and it's spelled Gimel Lamed, which is the numerical value of 33, which for another class, we can talk about how it ties into the very deep mystical idea of Lag BaOmer, 33. But really, the word, as I mentioned, gal means to roll. And gal is also the root word for the word galut, which means to be in exile. And the Baal Tanya explains that the word for exile is gal, or like galut, and the word for redemption is geula. What is the difference between the word for exile and redemption? You're gonna love this if you've been following this class. It's aleph. If you put the aleph into the middle of the word gal, it becomes goal, which is to redeem. In other words, if a soul is lost in the cyclic nature of this world, re-rinse, re-rinse, rewind, do it again, try it again, reincarnate, it'll never get out of that cycle until it breaks the cycle by finding the unity of the Aleph inside, back to hide and go seek. And that's what happens with the Gilgul. Therefore, each Gilgul is really trying to rectify things which haven't been done until it gets it. In the class with the Igbo, maybe I'll just do this again. So I'm not sure if anyone made it, so I don't feel bad about repeating it a second time. But my friends in Africa now know that one of my greatest, among many weaknesses, is drawing. So please forgive my artwork, or if that's what it could even be called. But in this, I'll just do this real fast, and hopefully there might be some of you who are geeks and will appreciate this. This is going back to real primitive, simple software, right? ASCII. So in software, in a flow chart, if you guys, well, you guys are probably old enough to remember this. I always love telling my grandchildren I was born before Microsoft. They can't quite grok that. They keep asking me what my email address was in college. So when you have the flow chart is moving like this, it comes in here to something that requires resolution. So in simple ASCII, the elements that sit in there, there are two elements. This is not the number 10. This is two elements, 0 and 1. So when it comes the flow chart, it comes in here, it has to make a resolution as to, is it going to choose the 1? Is it going to choose the 0? If it chooses the 0, then the program has to run again. Because it chose 0, it has to go over again. If on the next time down it chooses the 1, then the program continues. This is it. This is Reincarnation 101 in a nutshell. We have, as we move through time, we come to decisions in our life. Every single second of our life is a decision. Even choosing not to decide is a decision. Making an ignorant decision is a decision. Making a well thought out, educated decision is a decision. Refusing to make a decision is a decision. Brings back another Gary Larson cartoon where you saw like a husband and his wife in a living room, and their teenage kid is really pissed off, and he's pointing at his parents and says, I didn't ask to be drawn. So, you know, even if you don't want to be alive, guess what? You're alive. Here you are. Good morning. So at that moment when you come down, your choice is really, you know, here, Jewish math. 1 plus x equals 2. X equals, wrong. Yes. X equals 0. 1, this is Jewish math. 1 plus 0 equals 2. Why? Because there are two choices in free will: reality and everything other than reality. And so when one chooses reality, they have freed their soul from the need for reincarnation. When one is still stuck in the rotating, cycling, turning, gal process of reincarnation, then they simply come back and do it all over again. So the Chafetz Chaim had a very beautiful analogy about reincarnation. Many people who know the Chafetz Chaim would quite find it amazing that he would talk about reincarnation, but yes, he did. So he said like this: a guy comes to a synagogue on Shabbat, to a place where he's never been before, with his friend. He's sitting, a friend lives there, a friend brings him to a shul, and it's Shabbat morning, and the Gabbai is calling people up to the Torah for an aliyah. And the friend, the visitor, is watching the Gabbai. And the Gabbai walks over to one part of the shul and invites somebody, goes to another part, goes to another part, goes to another part. And the friend finally turns around and says to his host, this Gabbai is nuts. Why doesn't he just go to the front row, the first person, and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7? Why is he pulling from all over the place? There's no rhyme, no reason, no order. And his friend says, well, let me tell you something about the Gabbai. The Gabbai has a little box, and in that box is everybody's name. And he goes in perfect order. He just goes 1, 2, 3 of the cards. Now, it could be that the next guy is sitting over there, and then the next one's sitting over there, and so on and so on. But it's perfect order. He says, your problem is that you're only here for one Shabbat. But if you were here all year long, you would understand there's a perfect harmony. So the Chavetz Chaim says, when the Torah says, these are the judgments, who sees justice? You see justice in this world? Are you kidding? This is a world of lies. The Zohar calls it Alma de Shakra, the world of lie. This is a world where the impossible can exist because it's illusion. And so therefore in this world, not what you see is what you get. It's not really true. But only through the world of seeing all the reincarnations will it become clear that everything God did was just and was deserved and was brought upon through our actions, not just bad, but also good. Nothing is lost. Where could there be a molecule of creation that gets lost? Can't be. So therefore, it's translated, as the Chavetz Chaim points out, that this is the world of judgments is really to be understood only by seeing all the generations, all the incarnations, can somebody really be able to understand justice. And I just want to add one more point, because I think when Rabbi Tamara was in the Igbu class, she really liked this. It is kind of cool, a little bit psychedelic, but it's good for you because it's a good brain exercise. And that is to break the reality of linear time. Linear time is very important. You know, although those of us living over here in Jerusalem and like having months and months in lockdown, a few of us just went and made a tremendous barbecue on the beach the other day, and some Israelis saw like these old former hippie religious Jews on the beach, and like, you know, what are you guys celebrating? So we said, we're celebrating coming out of lockdown. So, but like when you get into lockdown mode, which I hope you don't have to, but if you do, you suddenly realize there's only 2 days in the week. There's Shabbat and not Shabbat, right? It like people don't know, is it Tuesday, is it Thursday? It's really kind of, so that's an easy way to break linear time, even though it's important to live in linear time. But I'll give you another example of non-linear time and how this is phenomenal. The name of God as Hashem, Yud-Ke Vav-Ke, is a conjugation of 3 Hebrew words that mean was, is, and will be. So therefore, God, in a sense, is the all now. I think we might have touched upon this once in one of our earlier classes, but it's worth doing it again, and then we'll hold up here. So from God's perspective, all time is now. The word then is a human term. It can be in the past. Hey, you remember when we were over there then? It can be in the future. Don't forget then when we woke up, right? It's about anything. Then is the future and the past. By God, it's all now. Okay. Think of this before we go further. When you look at items on your table, you don't think of them, or you might not think of them, normally you don't think of them in terms of time. You think of them in space. You say, oh, well, that's on the left side of my desk and that's on the right side of my desk. You don't think of, well, that's before and that's after on my desk, but it really is, because to be able to move this pen to be next to this pen, I cannot do it in this now, because for it to go from here to here requires then, right? Because you can't move through space without time. You have X miles per kilometer, time and space. They're interchangeable, or they're linked together. So to go from one point to another point is a requirement of time. So, but there's 2 ways to look at this. You could say that this is 5 inches away from each other, or you could say it's a half a second away from each other. Now, what happens when you think like that? So now, when we think, or if we think about reincarnation, often we do it in terms of linear time. We will go ahead and we will say, A person was born, they lived, they died, and now they are reincarnated. They were born in 1905 and they died in 1933, and then they were born again in 1976. Because that's how we see it, linear time. But not at all. If the purpose of reincarnation is merely to create the perfect environment in which that particular soul, by having those particular parents and brothers and sisters, or not brothers and sisters, or not parents, is what it needs to learn its lesson for its purpose in this moment. So then it has nothing to do if it's the 17th century or 400 BC, or even maybe the year 2560. It doesn't matter, because from God's perspective, it's not working in time, it's working in place. So God wants to place the soul in the right place. This is why one of God's names is Hamakom, the place. And therefore, when something is in the right place, place is the ability to live in the finite world. What is the key of the word makom? Mekum. From, mem is from, kum, that which is erected, that which is established. That's what makom means, that which stands. The only thing that stands in this world is God. Everything else is transient. Don't you realize that you're not who you were 25 years ago? Don't you realize that the moon will go down and the sun will come up, and then the sun will go down and the moon will come up? Nothing stands still in this world but Hamakom, which is God. And how does God and the aspect of place, finite, where is the intersection between the infinite and the finite? So I will just share with you a very amazing Kabbalistic idea, and I hope it's not too hard to follow, because it deals with numerology and gematria, but please try to work with me on this. You have the name of Yud K Vav K, which we said is beyond time. It's the infinite now. And then you have the name of God as Makom, which is the total physical presence in this world. So every time a letter in Hebrew is multiplied by its own letter, it represents its epitome, right? Don't forget, in Hebrew, there are no such things as letters. These are symbols which are simultaneously numbers and letters. They're not letters that are ascribed numbers. They are symbols which are both. So therefore, if you look at the name Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey, let's do a little math. Yud times Yud is 100. Hey times Hey is 25. 5 times 5. And since there are 2 letters Hey in God's name, so that's 50. So we have 3 letters already taken care of, 150. The 4th letter is Vav, which is 6. So 6 times 6 is 36. 36 plus 150 is 186. The name of God, Yud K Vav K, expanded to its epitome, is 186, which is the numerical value of the name of God of Hamakom. Hamakom is 186. That's the synapse between the infinite and the finite at that moment inside that. And why 186? That's not for this class, but that's just an interesting kind of an idea. So therefore, since God is not working in time, but rather working in space, not 138, 186. So if God is working in time as space, so then somebody can live, die, and be reincarnated in the past. Somebody could live and die and be in a crib in the maternity ward, and the next crib is another baby, of whom this baby is the reincarnation of the life that this baby hasn't even lived yet. I'll leave it like that. But that's what happens when you step out of, yeah, please, Bob.
2 things, if I may.
For sure.
I keep getting the word synesthesia, which is like smelling colors, when something is Shabbat or not Shabbat, or the baby from the past and the future. So this sort of, each time you say something like that, that word pops up in my head. But I have a question. You know, I'm a Jew, and I'm
That
one
B-O-O?
Jewish Buddhist, for the people who don't know. I'm also agnostic, so that saves the grace. But I have a question. In Buddhism, you have the idea of a Buddha, an enlightened being, but you also have a bodhisattva who is as good and as enlightened as a Buddha, but because he has infinite, or she has infinite compassion for every suffering creature, comes back and says, I will not be a Buddha until everyone is a Buddha. Do we have anything like that in Judaism?
Oh, for sure. In fact, I'm very happy that you raised that. Let's take a look at a word in Hebrew that is unfortunately very abused, goyim, right? People use this word in a derogatory way. I find it sickening. Goyim is a biblical word which literally means nations. That's all it means. And the Jewish people are called Goy Echad, one nation. And the idea of them being as one nation means that all of their souls are really one soul. And in other words, all of the Jewish people's souls are somehow, which we can, I'll show you this somehow. The souls of the Jewish people roll back into the 70 souls that Yaakov brought into Egypt. This is Shivim Panim LaTorah. These are the 70 facets of the Torah. And the idea of 70 is, again, something times 10 is its fulfillment. So the 7 days of creation times 10 is symbolized in the number 70. And the same way that these all of the souls, which maybe roll back to 600,000 and then compress into the 70, then compress into the 12 tribes. And the 12 tribes, each one of them had a flag, which was a zodiac symbol, because they are the 12 months of the year. And each one of those 12 months is a different variation of Yud-Ke Vav-Ke. So each formulation of God's name has an effect and creates a different one of the months. So therefore, the Jewish souls roll back into the 70, which roll back into the 12. And that symbolized that when Yaakov took the 12 stones and went to sleep at night, when he woke up in the morning, they were now one. So the 12 then rolls back into one. So all Jewish souls are really connected as one into Yaakov. And that's a microcosm. On the macrocosm, all human souls roll back into Adam. That's how we began the class with the book of Adam, where all the souls are written in the book. And Adam greets each person when they come up, because that's another little piece of his soul being recompiled and put together. So until all the souls are rectified, none of the souls are rectified. I always say that, I say as a Jew, if you believe in peace, peace is even in the slave mines of Brazil. In other words, if there's not peace in the entire world, in other words, if you spell peace, P-I-E-C-E, that's worthless. If you spell it P-E-A-C-E, or, Shin Lamed Vav Mem, then Shalom, which is peace, is connected to Shalem, which is whole. So therefore, all of mankind, all of humankind, all of womankind, all of kind has to be rectified for there to be a completion. That's why the Zohar says that until the last soul comes out of the Olam Haguf, which is the place in heaven where the souls are stored, the Mashiach cannot be coming into the world, because all souls have to go through that process to be rectified. Anyhow, it's 10 o'clock over here. I'm not sure that it's quite 10 o'clock over there. But
9 o'clock.
With your permission.
Gedalia,
Yeah.
shall we wrap it up or have some 1 or 2 questions?
Oh yeah, for sure. If anybody,
I'm pretty sure that you can go for another 3 hours
easily,
without any
happily.
problem. And I might also, but I'm not sure that everybody else is. But maybe, are there more questions?
But you know what? Let me unmute everybody.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Well, you know what? I think you're gonna have to do. There's not a way to unmute everybody. So
You have to unmute yourself.
right. Yeah. So just hit your space bar, and that would unmute yourselves. But anyone has questions, please fire at will. I'm sure Rabbi tomorrow will be happy to answer them.
Yeah.
Ko
Yeah,
Yisrael Chaverim.
sorry. I can? Yeah?
Yeah, David, please.
Yeah. Well, I like your teaching, and I have thousands of questions.
Okay, good night. Bye.
but for this time, I
Oh.
will ask
A
one.
small one. David, a
One.
small one.
Okay, I have a cat, and my cat, the way she died, it was very, very special for me. She was very old. I came one afternoon, late in the evening, and she started bubbling, and she died 5 minutes after that. She was waiting for me all the day. She could have died like before or later or the day after, but she died like within the 5 minutes. And I would like to believe that she lives somewhere. I don't know what does the Kabbalah say about the reincarnation of these souls, because animals have a soul.
For sure they do. Well, I don't know. It would be very hard. I mean, maybe if we could develop like a GPS, like God positioning system, so we could track souls when they leave, that would be an easier thing. But I think the thing is like this. There is no such thing really as an animal soul or a human soul or a rock soul. It's all a soul, but it comes down into different vessels. So a higher soul or more evolved, intelligent soul might come into a human, maybe a little less soul would come into an animal, maybe a little less soul into a plant, and even less soul into a rock. But ultimately, it's all attached as one. It's only in the physical world that we have vessels that make things. You are different than me. You are you, I am me. But once you get out of this world, it's all oneness. It may have shades or facets or things of this nature, but ultimately they're all connected. So everything that comes close to a person in their life, especially living things, have to be some aspect of your world beyond just who you are as David in this world. So it's quite possible that the animals that surround us, as an example, are maybe facets of other family members in your world who are temporarily come back to be close to you for some moments in time. I mean, we find many stories in the Talmud of animals that take on the very spiritual, like Rabbendosa's donkey became so religious it wouldn't even eat non-kosher food. So there are many examples of animals that have these elements in them. So I would almost imagine that you were very blessed to be able to have a contact on a very emotional and deep level with a precious soul that was temporarily living in a cat. Now, I'll give you an example. You drive a car, and when you get to where you're going, you get out of the car. Yeah, I'm not gonna let go of the car. You're nuts. Get out of the car. You're not. No, you get out of the car. So that's all this is. This is just a car. It's just a boat. It takes us from the womb to the tomb. But that's it. Then we get out. And then if we have to come back, maybe we come in a different car, the form of a cat. Who knows? But this is just a world where things are called Olam Asiya, a world of action and doing.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
No,
Can
no,
I-
Bob.
can I,
No. Bob, Miriam wanted to ask
Oh,
a
sorry.
question. Oh, you wouldn't. Oh, you're already over. Okay. So is there somebody else?
Yeah, me.
And there's the cat.
Who is me? Who's me?
Me, Alexander. Bob, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I'm with you.
Yeah, Gedalia.
Sure.
My question is like, you started off with saying like, okay, one thing in Judaism we're sure of, and one of our main principles of belief is that we believe in the resurrection of the dead. So if I now incarnate as, well, the person I am now, and the next time I'll incarnate as, I don't know, an old lady, and the next time I incarnate as, I don't know, whomever, But you already know my question,
Yes, I
right?
do. It's a great question.
Okay, so please elaborate on this and tell me.
I will, but I have to
The
just say,
moment-
you can't be reincarnated as an old woman. You gotta like be born to get there. Okay, but I'll tell you, not only do I love your question, but when I was in yeshiva, you know, in yeshiva world on Purim, we used to make skits and have theater. And I made a skit exactly on your question. And what was the skit? We had taken a facade of a house. You're in the audience, okay? So we used dim lighting and you just saw the front of a house. And hopefully you didn't notice this, but if you did, you would have seen there were like 4 people lying down, but with their feet facing you, but it was dark, so you wouldn't notice it. And then all of a sudden, you notice one of them because a spotlight hits him and he gets up and he's wearing Roman clothing. You know, he'd been in the grave for a while, so he's a little stiff and he has to stretch. And he goes over to the house and he's brushing off the dust and he's going, oh, I'm home. But while he's enjoying it, a next guy gets up and he's wearing like, I don't know, like 17th century French clothing. And he comes over and says, wait, this is my house. And then this guy saying, no, it's my house. And all 4 of them start to argue because they all lived in the same house, but in different generations. And then in the end, they discover that actually each one of them was a reincarnation of the other one. And so they all live happily in the same house. So the question is, right? Did I get it? So the question is that if we are all these different reincarnations, do we come back as a collage? Right? Do we come back like a Picasso? Or do we come back as different people, like having little puppet fights, right? So it's a very, very good question. And I have seen a few writings on this, and there is no one clear opinion. And as my rabbi said, why break your head? Just wait and find out. However, the little bit that I saw was that there will actually be a perfected being. You know, when Adam and Eve were originally created, they did not have skin. Their skin was light. This is why the word in Hebrew for light is or. And the word for skin in Hebrew is or, but with an ayin instead of an aleph. So when Adam and Eve were originally created, they were beings of pure light. And when they sinned, whatever that means, not for tonight's class, they then became ensconced or encased in a physical form. So we live in these physical forms. You know, I hope you've had many cars, or I shouldn't say that. I hope you have had a few cars because you didn't get into accidents, God forbid. But I've owned cars, right? So, but I was always the same driver, whether it was a Volvo or Chevy or a Mustang. I was the driver. So the element of us, which are in those incarnations, is your pure you. And so that in the incarnation of resurrection of the dead, there will be a body like that of Adam before the sin, because now you'll live forever. And that being will be a being of light, which will be a composite of these various incarnations that we lived. I hope that helped.
Okay, thank you so much.
Oh, pleasure, pleasure. Listen, this is as close to Amsterdam as I can get, so I got to enjoy every minute.
So is there somebody else still?
May I?
Please.
Yeah.
Papa.
Oh, no, not Nava, you go.
Wait a minute, okay.
Napa.
I want to ask something about the following. What if somebody refuses to reincarnate and tries to learn all the lessons in this life?
Yes, God bless them. I try to do that. You know, I was a hippie. I was a Hasidic rabbi. You know, I always say there are 2 kinds of Jews, Hasidic and Asidic, and I've been both.
How do you spell acidic?
ACI,
or C?
no, LSD. So I believe, Nava, I am totally with you. I am trying to do all of my reincarnations. I don't want to bother God. No, it's okay. I've already done that. That would be the best of the best. So I'm on board with that. So I don't know if we can, but I agree with you. We should definitely try.
Oh, that's
Only
thank you
know
for
for sure.
encouragement. Wonderful.
For
Thanks a
sure.
lot. This is great.
For sure.
Galia, can I say something?
Hey, Robert, an American.
Yeah. There's a book by Professor Brian Weiss called Many Lives and Many Masters. The story behind his book is he was the chairman of psychiatry at Mount Sinai Hospital here in Miami. And he was doing a hypnosis on a patient, and they started to speak another language, which was odd to him. And then he discovered that through a process of hypnotism, that she was in another life. She was in another life, and so he did a lot of research on the topic called Many Lives, Many Masters. He put the book out, and he lost his job because it was too out there. But he's been doing past life regression for 20 years, and it's a fascinating book on the topic. And there are certain things that happened that was really mind-blowing. Although he's not an observant or religious Jew, he was very taken aback by one of the patients who he hypnotized, who said, "I have your father next to me," and she described his father perfectly, and this lady had no connection to the father.
Well, there was a gentleman named Dr. Moody. That's okay. I see some heads nodding, and there is a rabbi from the Sephardi community about 50 years ago, about 10 years ago in Jerusalem, who took Dr. Moody's book and paralleled it with the Zohar, where it talked, because Dr. Moody was somebody who went around the world finding people who had near-death experiences and found common denominators, no matter what the cultures were and so on, of what their experiences were. And he showed how these experiences were all recorded in the Zohar. And then in the Zohar, it went on to a point where no person ever came back. In fact, this was something we just spoke about yesterday, and I think it's in the other class. I'll just share with you briefly. When a person dies in this world, it freaks out. And the first thing it does is run home, because it's sort of comfortable. And that's why we cover the mirrors, or reflections, not just the mirrors, because for the soul or the person to look in the mirror and not see themselves is horribly frightening. And this is why we do Shiva, because the soul stays there for 7 days. And I just imagine, God forbid, a soul comes back and sees the kids breaking out the whiskey. Yeah, where's the will? Who gets the car, right? That would be very depressing for the poor person who died. But if he walks in the house and the people are mourning, so he can mourn with them. But then after the 7 days, the soul is called lifted. And the lifting is where it begins to move out through the building, maybe trying to hold on to the chimney, but it doesn't help, and so on. And then eventually begins to be the level where, it sees the North American coastline, and then it's the third rock from the sun. And then it's so far away that even if it could reverse this process of moving away, it would never know how to find its way back to Earth. And at that moment, the soul relinquishes, if you will, and turns around. The Zohar says there that, as it says in the Torah, Ani Yosef, when the brothers encountered Yosef and were shocked, then the soul hears Ani Hashem, I am God. This is kind of why some people are familiar in prayer. Some people say at the end of their Shemona Esrei a certain verse 3 times, which captures their name, because at that moment, a person might not be able to remember their name, which wouldn't be so good. And at that point, that's when all of a sudden an angel appears, and this angel has your face. And when the person encounters that angel, so God says, yes, you see this angel? When I made you, this is what I had in mind. Now let's have a look at what you did with it. And this is Abraham as he was in this world, Abraham as he is in the next world. So a person who really lived who they were morphs and becomes one with that. It's a wonderful embracement. But for somebody who didn't live who they were, then this is part of the concept of the pain of hell, is this process of the earthly trying to burn away the klipot, the shells, in order to be able to join with that perfect being, if you will. And that actually comes back to the question the gentleman asked before about if we're all these incarnations, who do we come back as? That is that component that we come back as, unified as one.
Yeah, what I have a very short, I won't make it long.
No, it's okay.
But I happen to have had many dreams about what you could say reincarnations of myself. And because I always write down my dreams every day, I started to see patterns and I was able to, but the thing is, I had many dreams about one particular man, and later on I found out that this man actually had existed exactly in the way as I dreamt. But what really helped me to wrap my mind around this whole concept, it is like, how can I dream about these people like this, was, and this man happened to be someone who could play the piano very well. But when you have a piano, you have a D string, for instance, on many different places on the piano. And when the piano is well tuned, when you hit one D string, you can feel the other D strings vibrating. And to me, it was as if I am, when you look at the whole piano, you can say, well, this is the past on this side of the piano. And on the other side is the future. You have one D here and one D here. And if this person I dreamt about is this D that is in my past, so to say, and I'm the D a little bit further on, I think sometimes you can be aware of that other. And you can say, well, they're both Ds, so they are the same. Or you can say, no, because they are at different locations, so they're not exactly the same. But I think that maybe the whole piano can be played by God, so to say. They can jump from one side to the other, and in this way experience whatever they're, make music in that sense, or experience life. And what I find so fascinating is that these different lifetimes, they fit together like puzzle pieces. And even if I hadn't been aware of this other D string, I would have done exactly the same things as I'm doing now. Because this man was blind, and now I'm working as a sign language interpreter, specialized in working for the deaf-blind. And I was already doing that also before these dreams. So what I thought was, it just is so balanced. And I also had other lifetimes that I became aware of because of these dreams. And it really was a big relief to me that if we are just who we are, everything in all these other lifetimes are we balance each other out, so to say. I don't know if it's clear. But,
no, very clear. In fact, I'd like to ask you a question. What time of the night were these dreams?
Most of them were early in the morning.
Oh, perfect. Okay, you know what? I have to thank you because I'd like to share something with everybody and I completely forgot about it. And because of what you just said, please stay with me for a few more minutes. I'm going to take over your screen. It's like Twilight Zone. Don't touch this screen. I'm going to take over the screen for a minute. And I want to share with you the People's Talmud for a minute. You'll see why. This is the website many of you are familiar with. I spent 30 plus years building this. It's to enable Talmudic wisdom to be accessible to people without the skills of learning Talmud. And I'm going to just move this out of the way here. Okay. And it's designed like it's called the People's Talmud. It's designed like a bookshelf. So when you click on it, it opens. Now, one of the things that you might enjoy very much here is you have here categories and listings. So the listings and categories are basically that. In other words, listings would be if you came, for example, under food, you would have everything here from almonds to bacon to karpas and so on. And if you came over here to food, for example, you would have concepts or categories about food. In other words, delicacies or eating disorders or vegetarian or so on, okay? So having said that, inside of this here, you have a section called meditation. And in meditation is dream interpretation. and you hold the mouse here, you see there are 58 sources in the Talmud that discuss dream interpretation. And so all you need to do is click, and now you have Life Without a Dream. If you want, it explains to you where the actual Talmud is. But you can now click through them with, these are narrations, not translations of the Talmud. And you will be able to, within a matter of, I don't know, 10 minutes, 30 minutes or whatever, click through all of these concepts of dreams. And you'll find the difference between a dream in the early morning, which is partially prophetic, as opposed to a dream that comes towards the middle of the night, as opposed to a dream which comes in the morning, or what happens if you see animals in dreams, or if you see food in a dream, and all of these things. And it might be a tremendous tool that you might enjoy. For example, not only do you have this under dreams, but you can also come here under content providers. And these are Jewish organizations and teachers who have uploaded content. So take, for example, here under Steinsaltz, you see each one of these boxes has a little 3-dot drop-down menu. So now all of a sudden you can find out, and it shows you what it is, if it's a PDF or if it's in video. So here's dreams, for example. If you click it, it brings you to the one we saw before. But now if you notice, the TV is illuminated, and you simply click on the thing, and here you have a half-hour video from the late Rabbi Steinsaltz in English, all about dreams. So this is a way, if you wish to research this. I mean, I'll just show you for one more example, and then I won't keep you guys anyway, I apologize, but how I built this class tonight. So I went in here under, well, there are actually a couple of places. One is Life After Death. So you have things like, do the dead hear the living? Judgment Day, people who died and came back, what's happening in heaven, what's happening in hell. That's one source. We also have here, though, if you come under the supernatural. So here you have abnormal, or I always think of abnormal like A.B. Normal from Young Frankenstein, but we're not going to go off into Marty Feldman right now. And then you have beating death, changing the laws of nature, fortune telling, divination, superstition, but then you have reincarnation. So you click on, click on reincarnation, and now you have 10 different sources in the Talmud that address the concept of reincarnation. So in about an investment of 10 minutes, you'll be able to get a whole aerial view of what the Talmud has to do dealing with these kind of concepts. So this is something that, you know, and it's all free, by the way, so you can join twice. But this is just something I think, you know, and if you want to be a little bit more pragmatic, here you have the entire Talmud. You can take any one of the books of the Talmud you want. It gives you a quick little blah, blah. You can then go into entries, which are the beginning. So here, if this particular whole book of the Talmud is 340 entries, and you begin to simply just migrate through them and pick up an entire book of the Talmud and what it represents and so on. All the artwork, by the way, were done by my people I used to mentor from Bezalel College. And then you also have, in the same way, instead of going to that, if you want to do something really fun, you can come into teasers. And teasers is a high-speed method of understanding all the ideas found in each book of the Talmud. So here's the book of Makot. When a conspiracy theory is more than just a theory, the accountability of an accomplice to a crime, intelligence of the law is no excuse. Can capital punishment deter murder? Sometimes it is just a bad place, right? And so on and so on and so on. And if one of these catches your eye, there are no coincidences, bam, you can come right into the Talmud that discusses that. And if you then want to see the actual language of the Talmud and you don't speak Aramaic, go to Show Me. And that'll open up our friends in New York that have Sepharia, and you will have the Gemara, the Talmud, in English, with of course, the original in between it. And we find that if you read this and you know what's going on, then you'll be able to read this. And if you're still stuck, you can come here to Seriously and email in a question or find online tutors. You can save the text. You can share the text. If you do it on your phone, you've got, I was going to say WeChat, but not yet. You have WhatsApp. And again, as you find your content providers you like, they will become illuminated here when they become something which is appropriate. So if dreams are something which obviously is important to you, or another thing which might be of interest, which is important to you, for example, here, music, dealing with musical instruments, since you're talking about pianos, 23 different Gemaras. Yeah, that's if life deals you a lemon, right?
Yeah.
So you can read all about the musical instruments of King David or the musical instruments of the Levites that were used in the temple and so on. So anyhow, thank you, because I would have completely spaced out on that. But I know there are a lot of you from Amsterdam that are registered and are using it, which is really cool. So
How do you get people?
I have one
Ik zal
more.
je helpen, Nava.
Okay.
sorry, say again.
Gedalia, I have one more question before we wrap up.
Sure.
That's from Fabienne. And she says, I think I have seen the soul of my mother, so that's Fabienne, leaving in a flock of sparrows in the air. One more moment they were there, the next moment they were invisible. Is it possible to see the soul leaving?
Oh, absolutely. It's just a question of if you're worthy of seeing the soul leaving. Certainly the soul can be seen when it's lit, when it leaves. But you know, you can have two people standing side by side. You know what? I'm sorry. Let me take back this answer, and I'll just do this because you guys know me already. I love Gemara and Talmud. I'm going to tell you a wild Talmud, and this Talmud story will answer or address the question. The Talmud is talking about Daniel and the last three prophets, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi, walking down the street. All of a sudden, Daniel has a vision, which Rashi on the side says is the coming of the Mashiach, but that doesn't matter. If you want to look at this up, this is the Gemara Megillah on Daf Gimel Amud Aleph. Tremendous Gemara to take a look at anyhow, but that's a side point. So and you go down the long strip, and when it gets wide, it's right in that area there. So the three prophets don't see, get that? Don't see what Daniel sees, and they freak out and they run away. The Gemara is like, huh? If they didn't see, what were they afraid of? So the Gemara answers, because their mazal, the angel, for lack of other words, that sits above them, sees. Even if they didn't see, the mazal sees. But Daniel was blessed or elevated to the point where that vision was brought to here, which means to say that maybe because the soul was so close connected as a mother and a child, that was able to penetrate into this level of seeing, or maybe just this level of seeing, which is the seeing of the third eye, but not the physical eyes, and therefore they could see into this other dimension. But the question really becomes, though, what is it that they didn't see? And what do you do about it? So the Gemara takes a very practical approach. The Gemara says that therefore your mazel can see something which your eyes don't see. And then the Gemara says, and therefore, if a person feels a terrible fear, yes, Virginia, there is a boogeyman. And so therefore the Gemara says, what should a person do? So the Gemara says, run away. So the Gemara says, well, what if you're in a place where you can't run away? So then the Gemara is always very, very practical, right? Just to digress on my digression from the digression that we're digressing from, there's a Gemara of Eliyahu Navi is found in a graveyard. And so the Gemara doesn't say, wow, but isn't he dead? What's Elijah the prophet doing in the cemetery? No, they say, hey, Elijah, you're a Kohen, Pinchas. You're not allowed to be in the graveyard. So there's always very, very practical kind of approach to the mystical. Anyhow, so the question then is, what do you do? So the Gemara says, say Shema Yisrael, because Shema Yisrael has 248 words, which relate to the 248 parts of the body. And therefore, Shema Yisrael will put a force field over you and will protect you. Well, then the Gemara says, well, what if you can't do that? Because you're in the bathroom. You're not allowed to say holy words when you're in the bathroom. So then what do you do? Again, very practical. So the Gemara says you should say the following, that there is a goat in the slaughterhouse fatter than me. In other words, why are you wasting your time with me? There's so many other big, know-it-all, powerful people. Go deal with them. Don't waste your time with me. But again, that's all side, and I just thought it's kind of brilliant because that's the way the Talmud deals with wild, mystical things, but they're only interested in the practical application. But the point I wanted to make to address her question is, yes, of course, it's very possible. And I mean, normally a person has to be very evolved and very elevated to see such things. But then again, if it's a very close relationship like that, then that in itself could, the proximity of the souls could enable such a thing. And the idea of the birds is very, very deep. I mean, you know, again, go into the people's Talmud, go under animal kingdom and look up birds, and you'll find amazing, amazing things about birds. I mean, they're very holy creatures. So anyhow, I hope that kind of addressed the question. Oh, good.
I feel a connection with
You can't
cats.
see my face, but I'm smiling and I'm really happy. And I want to thank you on behalf of everybody for
Oh.
these 2 hours, which were amazing again.
And look, I'm going to try to click them in. I can't click them in.
I can't. I don't know what happened. I don't know.
Oh.
Something happened.
But I have my wonderful brothers and sisters from Igbo have joined
Yeah, also I've
us.
seen them too.
Dola, Dola. This, yay! Thank you so much for joining us. Hiding in the dark, I still found you. I'm like, Lo, I don't hear you.
You have to unmute.
I have to, oh my gosh, they're like so many names, I can't even find them. Oh, I found them. Hold on a minute.
Can you hear us? Oh, all right.
Yeah, hello.
Oh, okay, shalom.
Shalom Aleichem.
Shalom Aleichem. We are battling with the internet poor connection here. You know, we are in the seventh world, in the darkness of it.
Well, thank you very much. It's wonderful to always see you, and it's wonderful to see everyone from Holland, and it should only be with blessings and good things. And I look forward to our next class. So as we say over here in Israel, arrivederci.
Arrivederci, Chaverim.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Bye.
Brachot and blessings.